Hi, this is Annette Ross, host of Common Ground on the Sylvia Global Media Network. Today, I have the pleasure of having with me Catherine Craven, author of 222 Questions We All Should Ask Ourselves at Least Once. Catherine, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Is this your first book?
It is. It's my first book that I've published. So, put it that way, yes.
And how was that experience?
It's been great. It was not as difficult as it could have been. It sort of seemed to fall into place, which made me think that it was what we were looking for to accomplish, to move things forward in what we were wanting to do. And it seems to be well received. It seems to be going well.
And why was this your subject matter? What about it appealed to you?
Well, I just in observations and listening and paying attention and asking myself questions, wondering why we don't ask ourselves questions, things that seem so logical and obvious that are just not part of the everyday experience. I just thought it would be interesting to put them in one place and allow people the opportunity to read questions and dissect their thoughts and maybe look at their perceptions and realize that maybe they would be different if they really dove into each question.
So they're questions that you think are extremely relevant.
Yeah, I think probably, a lot of people would think they're relevant once they read them. I think a lot of people would think that the questions are relevant. It just seemed to me that it was odd that we in this current society, a lot of we being general, of course, there's an opportunity to understand, why do you think the way that you think? Why do you have this chronic thought of belief? What generated this? What created this? Is it based on truth? Is it false pretense? Where does it come from? And that sort of is what triggered my degree of interest in saying, hey, are we asking ourselves these questions? And if we're not, should we be?
And your thoughts of that is we should be asking ourselves these questions. One of the things you say is about questioning traditions. For some people, given where they are, whether they live here in the United States or whether they live somewhere else in the world, that's a pretty scary place to go.
Agreed. And it's not to say that traditions, whatever that happens to be, and that question that person's asking themselves, it's not about right or wrong. It's about, is it living in truth? Is it healthy? Is it perpetuating learned behavior that maybe perhaps is not healthy behavior? That sort of thing. If it's a tradition as to this is the way, it's a traditional dance, it's a traditional food, that's different. So I'm not necessarily suggesting that there's anything wrong with those things. Period. I'm not suggesting that at all on any level. I think it's just a healthy thing to ask yourself the question.
There are probably some cultural traditions. Even if we looked back not so far as arranged marriages or something, right? That you could, and people are starting to question. In that sense, it is progressive.
Right. It is. You mean being progressive and asking the question of arranged marriage a good thing?
It's progressive to think in this way. To think about, to not just accept certain behaviors and certain norms. They are what they are because we've been doing them forever. But to thoughtfully consider, why is it we're doing this? Because I thought the tradition question was particularly timely with everything going on in the world.
Agreed. And clearly my perspective is not from a culture that does that. My perspective is from a culture that doesn't do that. But there are different things. When you think of Southern traditions, which is very real in the Southern culture, of those, are all of those healthy and necessary? I would venture to guess not. So why are we perpetuating something that is not for the highest and best use of an individual? And that's really up to the individual. But I think a lot of times if you're not asking the questions and you're just rolling along because that's what's expected of you, well, then is that necessarily the way to go?
Well, that's not living a very thoughtful life. You also mentioned something about cracking glass ceilings. Just talking about sort of, your area in the South, your own personal experience. What do you mean by cracking glass ceilings?
Well, the South tends to still hold value upon the sex of the individual in a particular job and how that person is perceived and how the person is paid, and can they actually be effective if they're a female versus a male. And that's very prevalent here and now in the South. And it's something that you would think would not be, given where we are.
Well, maybe not. But so what, a girl or a woman who felt frustrated or felt that glass ceiling tower rather near, what would be a question she could ask herself? What's my way out?
No, because I think depending on where you go, it's going to follow you. I think it's more, how can I be effective and how can I pursue my goals with efficacy and not be intimidated by the situation at hand. How can I make the best of the cards I've been dealt in this situation? If this is where I want to be, then how do I change that perception in a positive way that's going to have a positive impact on me?
Catherine, what do you hope the reader achieves by reading your book? What is your best, what do you wish for them?
I wish that it would open the doors, open the eyes, open the doors, open the heart, open the thoughts to other ways to think. We all have perceptions, and those are all based on learned behaviors. That is where it comes from.
Where does that come from?
Learned behaviors.
Got it.
Whether you learned it from friends, from parents, from grandparents, from what you were taught in school, the region that you were raised in, all of these things are learned behaviors. We don't come out of the womb with these ideas. Mm-hmm. So what do we do when we are presented with an idea that we are questioning? It comes down to attachments. It comes down to judgments. It comes down to resistance. So if you look at things and you say, okay, I want to have a non-resistant thought about this. So I want to know, how do I feel about it in a non-resistant fashion? If I'm not going to be attached to the outcome, which is what I need to be, is non-attached, and then non-judgment on perhaps what the perception is of what I've learned versus what somebody else has learned. So, you hear people a lot of times talking about what they believe. Well, what is a belief? Where does a belief come from? It's a chronic thought, and it turns into a belief. Well, where did the chronic thought come from? Who perpetuated that? What around you perpetuated that? What did you read that gave you that idea? Who did you listen to that gave you that idea? We're fed a lot of information through veins that are not pure. So then what do we do with that? How do we take that and rearrange that so that we're non-attached, non-resistant, and non-judgmental? That's what I hope.
Well, wow. Okay. How do we do that? And let me ask you more specifically. Let's say someone's problem or issue was in the area of attachments. You said not being attached to an outcome. I mean, aren't we always usually invested in an outcome?
Well, being invested and being attached are very different. Mm-hmm. Those are very different words.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, so attachment is in a set of expectations, so to speak. I read something the other day that was talking about couples, and when a couple, when let's just say that there's this new movie, and the wife says, "Hey, let's go see this movie," and husband goes, "Well, I really don't want to do that." if she has a negative reaction to that because she was attached to the outcome because she wanted to go see the movie and she wanted him to go with her, then was that really an ask or was that a demand? So where do we fit in that? What kind of behavior is that? So if you've got the sense of disappointment because he doesn't want to go and do that with you, sure, okay, but I mean, take something bigger at a bigger level and that same level of disappointment, which is probably heightened. Where does that come in, and where is that sense of choice for the other person? Does that make sense?
It does. Okay, so we're sort of saying that my probably third grade reaction to that is we want what we want, and then we have to not be attached to getting it.
Right. So, I mean, that's exactly right, because if you're, the universe does its work, and it does its work, and we are pretty much not aware unless you are extremely connected and are aware. But on some levels, we're just not aware. It's just out there working. So if you're so focused and attached to this particular outcome,
yes,
then you're thinking that's the only way to get there. And if you're thinking that's the only way to get there, that the universe is trying to say, oh, but here's a better way, go this way. This is a much easier. This is going to be a lot less stressful. It doesn't have to be that hard. But you're so determined because you're attached to this way, which is 10 times harder, then what are you going to get? A lot of stress and something 10 times harder. So getting from point A to point B is great. But going the other way, attached to the outcome with judgment and resistance, you can't get there from there.
Oh, Catherine, you are talking to me on the most perfect of days. So I can infer from that you think the universe is looking out for us.
That's what I think. Just because that's what I think doesn't mean that's what other people need to think.
Okay, no, okay, I'm not saying that. So, but can you explain what that means? How is it that the universe maybe is in this conversation the greater good or all good, let's say? How does it sort of know what's best for us? How does that work?
Well, I mean, everything's not all good. There's a shadow side and a light side, and it depends on sort of which side you focus on and which side you spend more time in. So I think if you look at all of your influences of universal power, you've got Gandhi, you've got Buddha, you've got Jesus. You pick a deity; it doesn't matter.
Okay.
All of them exist in some sort of fashion that is around non-judgment, non-resistance, and non-attachment. If you really drill down the things that you've read and learned and heard, those things are probably truths. And so around that truth, where do we fit in? And I mean, again, if someone does not have the inclination to see or to accept perhaps that there is something more important and bigger and more powerful than they are, then this is going to rub them the wrong way. They're not going to connect with this at all. But someone that does, then they will. And it comes down to having faith. I mean, the power. I mean, if in a chapter in the book I say is your religion in a box. I mean, to me, it doesn't belong in a box. It's not something that's square and rigid and tight and stuffy. That's I don't think that's what the intention ever was. It's what it became through traditions, through learned behaviors, but it's not, I don't think, where it started. So if you roll with it more like a jellyfish, then I think you'd have the ability to see that it is much more powerful than just me. I'm like a teeny little bitty thing of sand on the beach. So if that's the case, then what does move all of this energy? Because everything is energy. So if you're putting out there negative energy and negative thoughts, and we've all been around that person, we walk in the room, we feel the negativity.
Yes.
We've all been in a room where we feel the light and the positivity. So take those two polars, opposites, and that's where we are. So you can either choose to be in one of those other places.
Okay. So So take someone who's been pretty hard on their luck, and then they're more of that negative space, and they genuinely want to turn it around. I mean, I would imagine for it to be effective, it would have to be authentic. So how do they get to an authentic place of more positive, creating space for more positive energy, if everything is energy? And I agree with you. And by the way, before you answer, I also agree that there is truth in many of the great religions, and those truths are really the great truths, and that even connect all those religions. And then there's dogma, and that's a separate thing, but then there are those great truths. So I can see everything you're saying to me makes just a lot of sense. But I just think that when you have someone who's been struck down a lot, I don't mean struck down, physically, but just had thing after thing after thing, we've all known them. Eventually, even the pluckiest of them is going to maybe be like, you know what? This universe out there is actually against me. How do they turn that scenario around?
Well, you said several things there. So, chronic self-recordings really determine a lot about how you look at life.
I really think so. Like if you think if I said to myself every day, I'm terrible, I'm no good, I'm terrible, I'm no good, I'd become that?
Sure. What opportunity do you have to become something else? Where are you opening up the opportunity to have a different thought?
Okay.
If you really, okay, so it goes back to King James Version. I think it's Psalm 27. As a man thinks in his heart, so he is. That's just huge. Just dissect that for a second. That is huge. So if you're so drilled down on negative thoughts and attached to that negative feeling and attached to the belief that you're not worthy and attached to that something else is going to come my way, then what else can the universe offer you?
Okay.
Yeah. So what you tune your mind into is what you tune your life into. The way you think, it's the organ of the brain is not just the organ of the body. The brain is your mindset. It is the way you think. It is the way you feel. So your thoughts drive your feelings. That drives your emotions. We have 60,000 thoughts. You can't begin to decipher those. How do you do that? Through your feelings. So your feelings are driving the way in which you live your life. If your thoughts are negative and chronic and deep and dark and down, then where else can the rest of your body go? It just can't. You're not giving it an opportunity. So is it easy to change the thought patterns in your head? Heck no. It's a wrestling match. It's a daily wrestling match to decide, what do I want to tune my mind into today? And some of the most positive people I know sometimes have a negative conversation or have a negative thought. But the key is when you begin to have that, you literally irk it. You slam on the brakes and go, not today, not now, not going to do it. And you change that to 180 degrees to the thought opposite of that. So it has to become a game because it's exhausting. Clearly, it's exhausting. But how exhausting is it to run around being negative all the time and to wear that helmet? That's exhausting. So it's which way do you want to be exhausted? So you've been around negative people that you can take them in doses because it is just exhausting to deal with their drama. But they're creating that. They are creating that with their thoughts and their actions and their reactions and their lack of control and their lack of understanding their own emotions and their own reactions. When you take two people, the same thing happens to them. One completely melts down and falls apart, and the other one unruffled feathers. How is that? What do you think?
Well, you don't think that a lot of that is life circumstances?
No.
That person?
It is the situation, but it is how you react to the situation. One person falls apart, creates drama, melts down. The other person deals with it. So it's the same situation. So it is how in which the person is programmed to deal and react to their situation. It's not the situation.
I love you and want to hug you, your cute picture, for saying that. But I mean, you don't think that the playing field is so unfair?
I think you can think that. I
You
mean,
don't
I
think that that's accurate?
well, I mean, I don't. Okay, if you lived in a different country, okay, I would give you that, yes, because there are
Okay.
limitations. There are limitations to what the society and the country within law are going to allow, but that is not the case in America.
Okay, so now we're talking America, where you feel that even growing up on the south side of Chicago, with 365, a murder per day, you can find a way out with some tools of thoughtfulness and.
It's kind of like this. If you sit around and you wait on the universe, and your furniture's been rented, and you sit around in your apartment and you wait on the universe to make something happen, they're gonna come and take your furniture. Okay? So, do you have to do something to create this change? Yes. Do you have to take on responsibility for the way that you think and your actions? Yes. Can you blame others for it? Sure. Is that beneficial? No. Who does that hurt? You. The person that you're blaming, they're moved on. You're just chronically wasting the energy of your brain, which is amazingly powerful, running around blaming and being negative about what your circumstances are. I mean, why do you think that some people get out? And are they that much better than the next guy standing next to them? I don't think so. Do they have a talent that they've spent endless hours cultivating with their mind and their body and their spirit to be able to get out? Yes. So is that what it takes? Yes. So, I had a conversation with a guy that leads this youth Christian group, and they were talking about, and take this for just what it is. Let's don't blow this out. Let's just take this for just what it is. And
Okay.
we're talking about helmets and football, and some kids are getting injured, and some pro football players have obviously gotten injured, etc. And I'm listening to him, and all of that is true. I don't take any of that away. But if you were to ask one of those kids who made it out, who was doing well, who now maybe has a tick in his neck or pain in his leg or something, or look at Muhammad Ali. Do you think for a minute he would have given up the life that he created through boxing for the life he would have had he not created that? I don't think so. So these people know what they're doing. These kids know what they're doing. These adults know what they're doing, and they're choosing to take the risk because it's given them a life that is outside of where they would have been had they not taken the risk.
Wait a minute. So are you saying they're sort of creating their own destiny?
What I'm saying is that everything is choice, lack or limit. Choice and mindset creates lack and limit. It just, that's where it comes from. Why do you think you lack something? Because you're comparing it to something else. And the limit, why do you limit yourself? You've decided you can't do this. Why have you decided you can't do this? Don't decide you can't do this. You can do anything that you decide you can do. It's the power of the mind. It's the power of committing the mind, body, spirit together. So these kids know what they're doing. They know that there's an opportunity for them to hurt themselves, to play this sport, to advance themselves, to create a whole new life and different life that they could have otherwise. That's a risk. That's a choice. You can't then go back and blame something else for the choice that was made. It's a choice, and it comes with consequences, like every choice does. Those consequences may just be deeper.
Does your book have some kind of prescription and way of understanding how to access the power of your mind? And I think you said mind, body, spirit together, right? By, you know what I mean? By
Like how do you work towards that goal?
work toward, if you're saying how powerful it is, and maybe people don't even recognize, you're right, there's scripture passages that talk about the power of the tongue, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that before. But let's just go on what you're saying is absolutely true. The mind is powerful. What you're thinking about constantly and focusing on is powerful. And it could be old behaviors. It could be things that are very detrimental to your spirit. how do you get these things in line, and how do you access the power of your mind?
Well, I think it starts with truth. I mean, it comes right back to just reading the question and deciding truthfully and honestly where do you fit in that. You know, there's a lot of people spend a lot of time on false pretenses, and false pretenses are the idea or the expectations of the way things should be, ought to be, could be. That whole avenue of should, could, would. So if you're spending time building a foundation based on a false pretense, then that false pretense is only going to dilapidate the minute that that doesn't work, the minute that that's not exactly right. So if you build everything based on this false pretense, then where's the truth? Where's the engine
Right.
of truth that you're going to be able to move forward with?
That's like a house of cards, right?
Right. So it's got to start there. Everything begins and ends with you. Everything begins and ends with you. You were taught bad behaviors. You learned bad behaviors. Okay, so you're going to blame that person that taught you that for the rest of your life and stay in that suffering place that you're choosing to be in because that's what you were taught? Well, you just made a choice. You chose to stay there. Then why are you blaming somebody else? Why does anybody owe you anything? You're not entitled to anything. Change the way you think. You know, but it comes to recognizing that. And that's the key. And a lot of people don't take the time and energy and do the work to recognize exactly where their mind is and what their mind thinks about.
Catherine, let me stop you there for 1 second. So then let's say someone was abused as a child, and we both know, or we may have known someone, but that those wounds can be very deep. And you're right. At some point, you have to stop blaming people for then your own behaviors as you grow. My thing is, though, you have to also truly experience the pain of that and work through it. I do think sometimes traumas can be so great that that trauma will only continue lifetime after lifetime if they're not dealt with somehow.
Exactly. I mean, exactly. And when I, you know, an innocent child, yes, there's karma, but an innocent child is an innocent child. I mean, there's not, they're innocent. So
Right.
when behaviors of others sort of spoil that innocence,
Yes.
then there's nothing at that point in time that can be done with it. What happens later is, as that child then begins to understand and then has the ability to become educated about what it is, then that's when it becomes important. And that's when it becomes important not to blame yourself for what happened, not to blame someone else for what happened, but it happened. So let's deal with what is and not what could have, should have, or would have been. So you got to deal with what is. And I think a lot of times traditional psychology sort of makes you so much rehash the coulda, woulda, and what happened
Yes.
that they take you back into this place that you really, it's not healthy. Why take the person back repeatedly to this place? It's an emotion, it's a feeling. So you got to deal with where it is right now. What is the child feeling now, and how has that affected their current thought pattern? That's what's going to be the key to this. That's what's going to be important, because you just take that current thought pattern, because what they were thinking when it was happening, they were much younger and they really weren't in so much control of that because they didn't have the education to understand the thought. But once they're at a stage where it's time to try to change that or fix a pattern that's showing up, the chronic pattern that's showing up, then that's when it's time to deal with what is right now and why are you thinking and feeling that. And it comes back to, it's like a reprogramming. You know, the beautiful thing about learned behaviors is they can become unlearned. Is it easy? No. No. But it's a choice. I want to change the chronic learned behavior thought, and I want to turn it into something different.
Would you say that even applies to something like addiction?
Sure, sure. And you know, when you start dealing with chemical imbalances, okay, that's a different ballgame, right? That's not a level playing field. And I've watched that with many of my friends, and some who have been successful and some who have miserably failed and are not with us anymore. So, you know, and there's an element to that too. I mean, we don't know because we're not in their heads. But the common thread that I have seen is that there's a resistance there, and there's an attachment there. And the chemical imbalance is there. The medicines can fix the chemical imbalance. We've proven that. That can happen. But then the individual that does not want to be attached to that lifestyle of here's a bag full of drugs, this is what I've become, or is resisting that they don't want to, they're resisting the correction because they don't want to be this bag of pills, then that's an internal struggle. And we that do not have a chemical imbalance like that have a very hard time. You cannot connect with that because you're not there. You're not there. So you can only do your best to try to understand and to try to, you know, be beside and support this person that's doing that. There's a difference in doing that and being an enabler or being codependent. That's a whole other ballgame. Or a fixer, you know, carrying the weight, propping up. That's just as bad for that person as strong love can sometimes be bad for that person. So it's a very fine line, and I don't think everybody can walk that. It's tough. The person that's walking the line needs to have just as much therapy as the person that's in the middle of it. Because you really have to learn how to coexist in that world. So it's tough.
Yeah, most definitely. Let me ask you. I've read some of your questions, obviously, and I want to ask you one, and that I got stuck on. I think I might have told you this in one of our conversations, and I'm still stuck. Is your story more important than your purpose? So right there, that implies to me that you think everyone has a purpose. Think so?
I think so. You said that the story is your story.
Yeah, this is your question.
Oh, okay.
It's just one that tripped me. That I sat and I thought, I don't know if I know the answer to that.
So is your story more important than your purpose?
Yes.
So interesting. What kind of drew that question out for me is I've been around a couple of different times folks that you meet them and you haven't really known them that long, and they're kind of regurgitating their story. And so then when you pay attention to that interaction and that story, then as you get to know them more, it seems like the language that they use and the way that they seem to like be in their own heads and their answers to certain things kind of gives you the impression that it's all about their story. So their story tends to define who they are. It's kind of like your work. Is your work, or is it defined, or is your work who you are? Or is who you are help reflect what you do for work? But it's a defining moment. You're not just your work, you're all these other things. I mean, a person is all these other things. But I've seen and experienced people with it's usually not a good story, but that story has defined them, and then they're sort of stuck in the story. There's no getting past the story. And sometimes the story is a great story, like a friend of mine that was a New York City ballerina for 20 years, hugely successful. It could not accept the fact that she was no longer doing that and was now teaching ballet at a university. And it didn't take 10 minutes before her identification was, well, I was a New York City ballerina. Well, that's your story. But that's not who you are. That's not who you are today. That's not what you do today. That doesn't define you. But it seemed as though it did. And for a long time, was very stuck with that. And now she's kind of grown past that and is embracing where she is today and who she is today. So it just, is your purpose being outshined by your story?
Well, in the most perfect manifestation of that, would you say that someone like Mother Teresa her story and her purpose are like almost completely in line.
Right.
Or
Which is
someone like Gandhi.
yes.
I mean, is that a goal to strive for?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on what your goal is. I mean, there are some. Well, I mean, think about an Olympic athlete. I mean, that athlete is. I mean, that's their purpose and their story are sort of intertwined, very much so.
Yes.
But then you have, in the Winter Olympics this winter, a wonderful woman that being a mother was equally important to her. So she had to change the way in which she was living her life so that she could do what her purpose was, which is connected to her story, but yet didn't define or change the fact that she wanted to be a wonderful mother. So, and a wife, and she wasn't being able to do those. She was in her story and her purpose, and only that.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds like people fear the transition of sometimes when a certain storyline ends, that their purpose is also ended with that, when clearly it's just, you're jumping on another train or you're turning the page of a new book, a new chapter.
Exactly. And if you don't do that, then you're just kind of stuck in the middle of that story. You've not advanced to the next chapter.
Okay, and here's another one of my favorites. What would you do? This is your question, one of the 222s. What would you do if you were given a second chance at life? Can you answer that for me?
I think that there's not any one answer. I think it's the idea of it is to say, okay, what would you do if you could do anything and you couldn't fail? What would it be? So it's that same sort of thing. So the idea is to instigate. We can do and be anything. There's nothing that's creating lack and limit except for our thoughts and our vibration and what we're drawing to us. Or the lack of doing the work. Again, you can't sit on the sofa and think that you're going to get to keep your furniture. They will take it away. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do with this daily life? What are you doing every day that's moving you towards this thought of either a second chance or if I could do anything and not fail, what would it be? What is your passion? That's sort of what that I'm trying to drive people to do, is to think along those lines. And we all, I think, as you work on yourself and as you work on your thinking and as you work on your environment and you surround yourself with, like thinking people, then you sort of begin to realize that I can co-create or create anything that I want. Anything that's feeding, it's going to feed me in a positive way, because the more that you do that, the more it comes. It just does. It's just the way it works. You can't explain it. It's just the way it works. And how many stories have we heard of people that have killed themselves or have turned their life around or have left whatever they were attached to and whatever was kind of killing them slowly, that they left it behind? And how does that happen? And that's sort of what I'm saying. I mean, it's all in the way that we're thinking and feeling and driving ourselves.
Well, that happens because I think of the despairing that's out there, right? You mentioned something sort of a little bit before that about vibrations. What do you sort of mean by that? I wasn't sure.
Well, we all carry a vibration.
Every human being carries a vibration. I don't know what does that mean?
Okay, so well, everything is energy. So energy obviously carries a vibration.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, you go into a room and you can sort of feel the person with the resistance and the friction and the darkness, and you can feel and see the person with the light and the happy vibration. You can feel that if you're attuned to it, and there's a reason for that. It's sort of like where you're vibrating. When you're yeah.
I missed you. I'm sorry. What I just missed that one thing you said.
Okay. You know when you're around someone that sort of is negative and they sort of, I mean, you can just kind of feel their energy. They're sort of vibrating low. That's what that means. They're vibrating low. And to be around them, if you're vibrating higher and then you're around them, in order for you to kind of be around them, you have to sort of lower your vibration, and so that you can sort of interchange with them, and then and that wears on us. And so then when you leave them, you're going, wow, that was heavy. Okay, well that was just really drug your energy and your vibration down. So then you go back out and you have to, you raise your vibration back up and you go along your day. Some people refer to that as like a vampire of sorts because they suck the energy out of you.
My daughter would love the vampire analogy. So how do you try, if you would want to, sort of bring that up a little bit, give yourself a little more energy, get yourself a little more vibration? What are ways, in your book, you pose the questions, and then do you offer some possible remedies?
Well, I think it's about where you spend your time in your head. Where are you spending time in your thoughts? Mind, body, spirit means all of those. So you have to move the body as well as move the mind to connect to the spirit. So, energy comes from what you put in your body, what you feed yourself, what you feed your mind. All of those things contribute. So it's important to generate this high vibration to pay attention to what you eat and where you spend your time and what you read and what you watch and who your friends are and what you do with your body. Because again, all those things, if they're just stagnant, they're just going to be stagnant.
So everything that you're putting in, you're giving out.
That's right.
So to speak.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that's why when you're around a vampire, everything you're putting out, they're just sucking from you. They're just taking from you just as fast as you can put it out. Right. And that's why it leaves you feeling exhausted.
And do you believe by people reading this book, it's going to give them some kernel, some sort of nugget to hold on to start to evoke? Because you and I both know that habits, change, I mean, sometimes the light bulb goes off, right? And we're new. But most habits, like you said, they require discipline and patience and time. Do you believe by people reading your book that they're going to have some solid nuggets?
I mean, I hope so. The idea would be that it would pique their interest and drive their interest. And how bad do you want change? I mean, that's just it. How bad do you want it? And so if you do, then hopefully this will lead you and push you to pursue. There's so much out there that is promoting the idea of connecting mind, body, spirit. I mean, there's so much. There's so many people, awakening to this concept, this understanding that we're all connected and we're all one, and it all begins and ends with you. So there's so much of that there. Hopefully, this will just pique their interest enough and their curiosity enough that they'll go, ding, ding, I'm ready.
Was there ever a time in your life when you needed this book?
Sure. I mean, I think really always. I mean, I don't know that it's an ever, like, it's not like a, like I asked, is happiness a destination? It's not a destination. It's an everyday thing. It's an everyday thing, and continuing to grow and move and allow yourself to be au contraire to what you thought before. I mean, somebody said to me, how brave it is for you to put your thoughts and your questions and then your responses in a book. It just puts it out there. It does, but yet it changes all the time. So my comment was, well, thank you. However, I hope that I've adopted another way to think about something that I've already written about. Because the more that you continue to dive into this, the more open you become, and the more open-minded you become about what's around you, and not have to put it in a box, and not have to put it into a place of comfort, We have this tendency to when something happens, go right back to that learned behavior reaction because that's comfortable, because you know how that feels, you know what that looks like, and you know that that does or doesn't hurt. But that may not be the best place for us, for that thought, or the best place for that reaction. So the more that you dive into this, the more that life does not have to be that hard. It does not have to be that hard. It's hard because we resist. It's hard because we attach. It's hard because we judge. We create so much of this energy sucking waste because of that. It just doesn't have to be that hard. You just need to learn to flow more, and not the sense of control. That is another huge element to all of this. Is this unresolved sense that we somehow think we control stuff. We do not control things. The only thing we control is the way we think. And the way we think controls the way we react. That controls our emotions. And that controls the way in which we live our life. We don't control anything.
Wow, that was really beautifully said. I only have one more question for you, but that was really, really so eloquent and so beautifully said. Thank you for saying that so perfectly. I wanted to ask you, in closing, what do you love most about your life?
Gosh, that I'm just growing and learning all the time. That I'm really realizing that the limits that we have are just self-created. That there's so much out there. That there are so many people, I think, that are really, gosh, it's sort of making me tear up. There's so many people out there that are really struggling, that don't have to struggle. They just don't know another way, and they feel trapped.
Yes.
And decisions or choices have perhaps made them feel that way. But there's always a different way. There's always a different way. And it just, decide you want to find it. Decide to invest in yourself. We invest so much money in stuff. Does it make you feel any better? Does it make us prettier? Does it make us healthier? Does it make us, yeah, some degrees, of course, but does it make us who we need to be? Does it make us happier? No, it doesn't. We invest in those things, and we just need to take time and energy to invest in ourselves. So
No, it actually just makes it heavier and harder to move around. But you're
yeah.
saying invest in yourself, and what do you mean by invest in yourself?
Well, invest in yourself. Instead of taking time to go to the mall and shop, go sit down with something that's a eye-opening, awakening type book. Read something that you've never read before. Go and walk in the park and connect with Mother Nature and be in awe. I mean, just do something different than that. Do something that you don't normally do. Invest in your mind and your body and your spirit. I mean, and go do a yoga class instead of cranking it out in the gym. I mean, just do something that's different, that is going to stretch you. And I think that if you'll do that, then it will open up lots of other things. And it will create this desire to know more about that, and desire to love yourself more, and desire to accept more, and desire to recognize truth and change more. We just don't invest enough in ourselves. And it's sort of societal. I mean, the society says if you concern yourself with yourself, then you're self-centered or narcissistic. But it's like, who came up with that? Yeah, you can be a jerk and you can be that, but if you don't invest in yourself and you don't invest in what you have to give, then who are you and what are you offering? It just doesn't make any sense to me. You have to invest in yourself. Nobody makes you happy. That is your job. That is purely, completely, and totally your job. So invest in yourself.
And then you think, just quite naturally, you put that out there in the world in terms of works of love, I would think.
Yes, totally. Because when you love yourself and you're in love with yourself, and again, we're not talking about narcissism.
I know you're not, absolutely.
So if you then then you can only put out love. Love and fear cannot live in the same heart. They can't coexist in the same heart. Either fear's going to win out or love's going to win out. And we're fearful. This society drives everything by fear. They want you to be afraid of everything. It is just ludicrous to me. I mean,
I agree with that. I agree with that. We're getting subliminal and not so subliminal messages all the time, and I think it's toxic, and I think it's toxic for our children. And I think you're a breath of fresh air. Now, I want to give you a chance to. Do you have a website?
I don't have a website yet. Sort of, my publicist is really pushing me on that. But you can Facebook, 222 questions, Facebook. It's available there. And then my email is cravenmountain@gmail.com. I would love for anybody that's reading the book to actually post something or go to Amazon.com and put a review up. The interchange is the key part, I think. And Facebook is an easy way to do that because it can be posted and responded to. But whatever people are comfortable with, you can get Kindle or paperback on Amazon, and it's not expensive.
So it's ready. It's ready, and it's out there and available now.
Yes, it's ready, and it's out there, and it's available now.
Well, thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you so much for your truthfulness and your openness and your honesty and your thoughtfulness. This is Catherine Craven that I interviewed today, discussing her book, 222 questions we should all ask ourselves at least once. I'd probably ask them 2 or 3 times, knowing me. This is Annette Ross on Common Ground, signing off for today on the Sylvia Global Media Network. Thank you again, Catherine.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely.